Thank you for joining us to celebrate the publication of The Missing Sister, the new novel from Lucinda Riley. My name is Harry Whittaker, I'm a presenter for the BBC in the United Kingdom, and Lucinda Riley is my mum. Hi!
Hi, Harry.
This is a big moment. This is the 7th of the 7 sisters. The big question everyone's going to want me to ask, everyone wants to know, who is she?
Well, that's a very good question, and that's why everybody has to buy the book to find out. What's interesting for me is the fact that I have known who she is since the very start of the series, so I feel very protective of her in a way, almost like because she's been inside me, I don't want anyone else to know her, and so giving her away to the world still feels quite odd. Do you know what I mean?
I understand. Were you always going here? Did you always know this is where you were going to end up?
I knew, obviously, because I'm following all the Greek mythology in the books, that there would be that missing 7th sister, Merope, just like in the stories. And I didn't know how I was going to get to her, or in fact where she was going to be or how she was going to be found. But she's always been there.
This is the 7th book. This is book number 7. Are we going to get some answers on some things?
Well, again, you'll have to read it and find out. But yes, I really hope that some of the questions that all the readers have will be answered. Yeah. Now,
I hope that I'm not revealing too much here by saying...
Be careful, Harry!
That the book is set at various times in New Zealand, it's set in Canada, and of course set in Ireland as well. We know research is so important for you. A big part of your job during the writing of the Seven Sisters series has been to visit whatever country you might be writing about. I imagine the pandemic has made things a little tricky.
It certainly could have done, but somebody up there was smiling on me because last November, and I'm not giving anything away because it's in the blurb on the back of the book, I actually went to New Zealand to do my research there, and I'm so glad I did, because obviously if I'd left it until January, February, I certainly wouldn't have been going there. So I went to New Zealand, did all the research I needed to do. I also went somewhere else, but I'm not going to tell you about that. And so sadly, the country I missed out on visiting, which I was really sad about, was Canada, because what actually happens, and I'm trying not to give too much away, is that all the sisters join together in the hunt for this missing sister, because they're all desperate, well, obviously to find her and find out who she is, so that she can join them and go on the cruise to lay the wreath a year on from Parsalt's death. So anyway, I didn't get to Canada, but the other place that they look for her is London. And obviously I have lived half my life in Ireland and the other half in London, so I knew what I was talking about there. And there's a certain hotel that I know very well, which is my favourite hotel in the world, which sort of plays a starring role as well. So that part of it was all good.
How do you compensate for the fact that you couldn't actually get to Canada? Is it a case of research through libraries, books, etc.? Well, maybe not, travelling to a library this year, but is it reading?
It's not just reading, actually, because the research can't, well, my research anyway, the way that I do it, can't ever come just from a book. And there is a certain, for example, in Canada, in the place, in the big city I go to, there is a certain tunnel. And so I wrote it first with, without the tunnel, and then actually did some more research and realised that the tunnel actually had been built at that moment. And so it's those tiny little things. And I know that if I get them wrong, that I will get letters and emails from readers telling me very bluntly that I have got it wrong. And these are 800-page books, and they are stuffed with research and events that happen. So it just goes on and on. If you think each character has to go through a day, and each thing that they do from the moment they wake up, where do they find water, what do they have for breakfast, how do they get to work, are they driving, are they taking a pony and trap, if it's obviously in the past, which it all is. So, the detail is just everything. The devil is in the detail. And I think the most beautiful thing that happened was the fact that I was at home in Ireland when the pandemic struck. And part of the book, and I'm not giving anything away because it's in the blurb on the back of the book, is set in Ireland and in my part of the world.
Obviously, Ireland means everything to you. You're an Irish citizen. Was it a challenge to write about your home country, or was it exciting?
Well, I think that when I was thinking about the book, when I was on book 5 and 6, I was, especially on book 6 when I got to the end, I thought, oh well, it'll be an absolute breeze writing, about my home country, because I meant to know all about it. When you're a child, that's the history that you're taught. And what I learnt very quickly was the fact that I knew nothing. And actually, the research for this one was the hardest I've ever had to do. And that was partly affected by the pandemic, because obviously I couldn't travel at all. The good news was that I'd always wanted to set it in West Cork, which is where I live, and very, very local to me. And so the way that actually I did the research, and I couldn't have done this without them, was I actually asked my local community for help. And so I was taken off to the most incredible places. This was once lockdown had eased, obviously, to see all sorts of things that you just wouldn't believe. For example, I went into the back of Beyond with my friend Carl, who knows everyone locally. And so he'd rung around to, ask grannies and, great aunts if they knew about this or if they knew about that. And if they didn't know, then they'd ask somebody else. And so on this particular occasion, we were driven into the back of Beyond. And a lot of West Cork, as everyone who lives there knows, is the back of Beyond. But this was the back of Beyond. And this man came walking towards us with this very long beard, and he had a pack of dogs around him as well, sort of like 15 dogs and a couple of Rottweilers, and this sort of barred gate between us and him and all these dogs. And in his hand he had this absolutely massive rifle. And anyway, this rifle turned out to be the original rifle of someone, a real life character, that plays a part in the story. But it was just incredible. And then I ended up, at cottages where arms had been stored, because the story is in the past set around the Irish War of Independence and the original IRA, and it's very important that nobody gets mixed up with what the IRA was then, which was basically Ireland fighting for its independence from the British, and not the provisional IRA that people will know from the 70s and the 80s. And I just went on this voyage of adventure to farmhouses in the middle of nowhere, where somebody would show me where where the weapons had been stored, and dumps in the ground that had been dug out in the middle of nowhere, in a forest where they could put the arms. And what is so incredible actually about the whole thing was that everyone who fought for freedom from the British at that moment, they were just young farmhands. They had no training whatsoever. Most of them were between 16 and 25. They were young boys who were more used to holding a pitchfork than they were a gun, and how they could actually defend Ireland and win against the might of a trained British army and a police force, and also thousands of them, is just an incredible story. And a lot of people might know the name Michael Collins, partly from the film with Liam Neeson. And I just want to say that, Michael Collins in real life was actually only 32 when he died, so he was a very young man. And yes, he was the sort of figurehead, if you like, that led them to victory. But those days in Ireland, the difference between being up in Dublin and down in West Cork, was huge. And really it was these brave boys all around Ireland who won this war and managed to get the eventual peace treaty. And it's actually 100 years on from that peace treaty being signed in December 2021.
So did you learn a lot about the Irish War of Independence that perhaps you were unaware of before?
Where do you want me to start? I feel like a sort of walking encyclopedia. And I also have to say I got a lot of help from a couple of professors as well, and journalists who helped me. And I also discovered this incredible women's voluntary organisation called the Cumann na mBan. And when you read it in the book, you'll see it, and it's spelled Cumann na mBan. It's pronounced Cumann na mBan. That's just to help you, because it's like one of those words you go, oh my god, how do you pronounce it? And their role in the fight as well for freedom. And I think that was what actually gave me the key to the story, because a lot of the literature that's written, all of the photos, are all the men, in the battles. And the women who were actually running the farms, out in the rural areas, were the ones who were also at the same time, wearing big cloaks with big hoods, with rifles stuck in the pockets of the cloaks, and taking them from wherever they were hidden to where they needed to be if an attack was going to be launched. And they were just so brave, and at the same time they were running their farmhouses, doing the cooking, feeding the pigs, the cows. And I think in a way this book is very much a tribute to them, and everyone is an unsung heroine.
So you mentioned writing about the unsung female heroes. It's a bit of a theme with the Seven Sisters, isn't it? A, you've brought together a community of women that absolutely love your stories, and B, they all feature very strong female characters. That's important to you, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Women are, when you say strong, I think that word, indicates strength, and strength comes from different parts of a woman. The definition of feminism is equality. And I always like to think that we are neither below or above men, but equal to them. And what I wanted to do, I think, in the stories, or in fact what I did intuitively and instinctively, was to look at the women I was writing about and their different strengths. And for example, Star, in her story, she is not particularly career oriented. She, at the beginning of the story, she doesn't really know where she is and what she wants to do. And she also feels, a little bit under pressure from her other sisters, especially Ali, who is her next sister up, who is this sort of, amazing human being who has won boat races and, can play the flute brilliantly. And actually, what Star does and what Star loves doing is being a homemaker. She loves cooking, she loves nesting, she likes making her home beautiful, and she loves looking after her boyfriend's son. And so it's celebrating women in, if you like, all their glory. And strength doesn't necessarily have to mean that you're going to conquer the world and become, the president of some incredible company. And yes, I think actually the rise of feminism and the fact that we are able now to have so much more freedom has actually empowered women to be who they want to be. And I think that's the really, really important thing.
You mentioned this earlier, so we can talk about it, but they're all in it significantly, aren't they? That must have been so amazing to write. This huge journey you've been on for the last decade. All these wonderful characters, all the sisters coming together. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, well, as I said earlier, the race is on to find the missing sister. And so all the sisters do join together to try to find her. And yes, it was absolutely fantastic for me to write because everyone is in there at some point. They sort of form a human chain to try and do their bit to try and track down Merope. And it's interesting as well because the last time that they were all together, if you like, even if it's only virtually, was at the beginning in the first book of the Seven Sisters, where they all have come back and they haven't seen each other for a while, and how much each of them has actually changed in the time since I wrote that first book, and they've all been on their own journeys, and how the dynamics of their relationships between each other have changed as well. And yes, it was just absolutely fantastic because it's like visiting old friends.
And did you find that you slipped into writing them quite easily?
Yes. Oh, completely. I think they're sort of, I know this sounds really weird and sad, but for the last 8 years, those seven sisters have actually been my imaginary friends because I've lived with them in my mind for so long that they almost have become real. And if it sounds crazy, it sounds crazy. Harry, yeah, you've got a crazy mother, help. But I know them so well, and it's as if they are real people.
And without revealing too much, it's not just the six sisters that return, is it? We've got a plethora of characters from across the last 6 novels too.
We do, yes. we have some guest appearances, people who have been around in the sisters' stories, who are still there and try to help in this the search.
I want to talk about Parsolt. Everyone wants to talk about Parsolt. Oh, I mean, what's going on? Some people think he's alive. Some people are convinced he's dead. We know that he's featured in all of the novels so far. People have been trying to work out where he's cameoed. Are we going to get some answers on Parcelt?
I'm giving you a deadpan face, aren't I? It's very, very difficult because I literally can't say anything.
Can't say anything.
So I don't want to say anything because obviously I don't want to spoil what is, well, I mean, you've read it.
Yes. I can reveal officially at this stage, this novel ends on the biggest cliffhanger ever.
Yeah, it's quite an explosive ending, and I don't mean that literally. But
or does she?
Yeah, but yeah, it is certainly, and I think actually it's been interesting because obviously nobody has read this book because it's been kept under wraps. Not even proof copies have gone out to keep the secret. And so the only people that have really read it are obviously you and other members of my family and all my publishers around the world. And all I've had is these emails going, oh, full stop, my, full stop, God, full stop. And I think I just need to actually now make a plea to camera to say that if you do read this book and you get to the end, I beg you, for other readers' enjoyment, please keep the secret.
It really is such a treat, this novel, for readers that have loved its six predecessors and become totally engrossed in the world of the Seven Sisters. I love all the sisters teaming up. There are secrets that are going to be revealed. You'll get some answers to some of those burning questions. More questions will be asked. You've got this huge cliffhanger. I'm so excited for this to come out. I really am. Was it an emotional experience writing book 7 of the Seven Sisters?
I mean, I think they are all incredibly emotional. In some ways, this was more emotional, and I think that's because this is part of my personal history, even though it's 100 years ago. But each book, I mean, I'm just really, really sad because I dictate the stories. I never ever type because I can't. I mean, literally, I cannot type. I'm dyslexic on a typewriter. So I actually talk the stories and I go through all the emotions that the sisters go through. And so if something really terrible is happening, I am sitting there dictating with tears falling down my cheeks because I'm just so emotionally involved, and also because I never plot before what is going to happen. Some of the things that do happen are a surprise to me too, and a shock. And also sometimes I can get really, really angry if one of the sisters or a particular character that I'm fond of does something stupid. And I'm just like, why are you doing this? But somehow it all works itself out by some weird alchemy.
So we've talked about people getting absolutely lost in the Seven Sisters universe, and I hear that there are rumours of the Seven Sisters not just existing on the page. What can you tell us about that? Well, again, a bit like the missing sister.
Yeah, I mean, there is a TV series, a major TV series in the pipeline, but as everybody knows, these things take a long time, and I don't want to jinx anything, but yeah, let's cross fingers. I don't think that the Seven Sisters has finished its run quite yet.
The big question is, if it happens, can I have a part?
I don't know, Harry. I'll have to see how you are in front of the camera.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well, Lucinda, thank you very much for chatting to us today. I know a lot of people will be really excited to actually see you interviewed because you're an elusive figure, aren't you? You're as mysterious as Parsold. So thank you for spending some time with us today. I really hope you enjoy the new Lucinda Riley novel, The Missing Sister.